everyone, Morgan here. So I get asked a lot about food storage and like what exactly you need to store for your food. Now, there's a lot of conflicting information about this, and I'm going to say a couple things before I talk about what I think people should store. But you know, you hear all the time that you need to store beans and rice. Beans and rice does last a really long time, especially when you put them in Mylar bags or vacuum seal them or something, and then putting them in a bucket or, you know, with an oxygen absorber, whatever. They do last a long time, but if you don't eat beans and rice, don't store beans and rice, okay? Just because something will last a long time, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's the best option for your food storage. In fact, some of the best options for food storage are things that only last a year. And I'm gonna talk about that here in a little bit. But with your food storage, you want to store what you eat. So whatever you eat, you wanna store. And even if it only lasts like a year, it doesn't matter because you're gonna be rotating out that food. And there's a lot of people that don't agree with the whole rotating out process, but it really works because it's food that you already eat. So you're just gonna be taking all that food out a year, putting it in your pantry, and then you know, replacing it. Maybe not all at once, you know, maybe a little bit at a time, like a week's worth at a time or something like that. But essentially that's what you'd be doing. And that's okay because it's all food that you eat. So if you don't eat beans and rice, that's okay. And it's not even about the fact that you don't eat beans and rice. It's about the fact that just beans and rice, even if you put some seasoning on it, it will get tedious, okay? You need variation. And beans and rice is not all the nutrition that you need, okay? And you know, you may be saying, well, canned food doesn't either, and you're right. There's a whole variety of stuff going on when it comes to food storage. And in the end, food is food. But it's gonna be up to you about what you should and should not store, about what you want and do not want to store, based on your budget, based on your space, and based on what you eat. Those are the three things that I would base food storage on. Okay, so in saying that, here are a few suggestions. Now, a lot of people will store MREs, but we only store a few. And we actually intermingle this with the rest of our food. So like, we don't have, you know, just MREs. We have some, you know, we can share like this whole bag of MRE, you know, between the three of us or whatever, you know, for a meal. Maybe, you know, once a week or something. You know, it's not like our meal plan is the MREs kind of thing. And the same with the Mountain House. I love Mountain House, and we have some number 10 cans, and we also have the pouches because they're really easy. You just add water. But they're not our only source of food. Okay, this is going to be, again, kind of like the MRE where we intermingle it with our other food. So maybe we'll eat this once or twice a week, you know, in our food supply. Our main food supply is going to be canned stuff, so canned chicken, canned vegetables, canned fruit, things like that. Now, cans, when they're stored, can last quite a while in ideal conditions, okay? But you still want to rotate it out, I would say probably every 1 to 2 years, just kind of depending on how you store it in general. But like our daughter really loves yogurt, so we get these yogurts that are actually shelf safe. That's a tongue twister. And the expiration on these is 1/28/2018. And that's actually already passed. These only last a couple months, but that's okay because she eats these. So I'll actually store these in our food buckets, in our food bins, and I'll just take them out every month, put them in the fridge, and they're still fine. And she really loves macaroni and cheese. Now these actually work without having to microwave them. Or you could just get this with some canned condensed milk, which we've tried it. It tastes really good with the canned condensed milk. And then no butter, it's totally fine. The butter is always optional anyway. So macaroni and cheese is still a really good option, especially if you have the condensed canned milk. And remember, the condensed canned milk actually has a pretty short shelf life. So, you know, as we're talking about expirations here, take them with a grain of salt, okay? They could last a couple months after the expiration. They could last several years. They could be dead on with the expiration. It just kind of depends on what type of food we're talking about here, okay? So again, keep all that in mind when we're talking about expirations. Okay, then, you know, just some other stuff like peanut butter and also stuff to make things. Flour, sugar, basic supplies for baking and or just kind of making stuff, you know, that's always going to be useful. You know, if you have a recipe for tortillas, that'll be a really great way to kind of replace bread kind of thing. Bread is fairly easy to make, especially like over a fire and stuff like that, but it just kind of depends. But anyway, you can get yeast that is shelf stable as well. From like an emergency food supply places. That's really good yeast. I've used it, it's good yeast. And then dehydrating your own food. I dehydrated this stuff many months ago, and it's still great. I have oxygen absorbers in there. As you can see, it's only in Ziplocs because I actually eat it. So I try not to put them in vacuum seal bags because I actually open and close and eat them all the time. But they had the oxygen absorbers in there. You can do vegetables to make your own stews and stuff. You can do dehydrated fruits. You can also do your own canned stuff. So canning meats, canning vegetables, canning fruits, canning all that stuff, canning your own soups, canning your own chilies, things like that. That's all really easy stuff that you can do at home. And that stuff can last quite a little bit, you know. It kind of depends, again, on how you store the items. You know, it can go anywhere from 1 to 5 years. It just depends. But you really want to pay attention and actually rotate this stuff out. And so that you have the freshest stuff available to you in an emergency or disaster. Because in an emergency or disaster, I'm telling you, you do not want to be looking at this and be going, is this good? When was the last time that I rotated this out? You know, I put this in 3 years ago and it's, you know, it said it expired literally 3 years ago. Is this still good? You don't want to be messing around with that. You want food that you know is good and ready to eat. Okay, so rotating it out is going to be a really successful way to do it. And so that you're not rotating so much, you can actually get like the Mountain House, the freeze-dried foods, things like that, and the MREs, which again, MREs actually only last maybe max of 5 years, okay? So they don't even last that long either. Freeze-dried stuff, dehydrated stuff, canned stuff, they tend to last the longest, but again, they don't last forever. Nothing lasts forever. You're going to have to rotate your stuff out. You know, even the beans and rice that you put in those Mylar bags, you really want to try to rotate that stuff out so it's the freshest possible. That's why I try to recommend that you not store so much beans and rice, because you really do want to be rotating that stuff out so that it's the freshest possible. Now I know there's a lot of varying thoughts on this, but my suggestion is to first go out and get canned foods because they're the easiest. You grab and go, and from there maybe you can move on to, you know, macaroni and cheeses with the condensed milk. You can move on to dehydrating your own stuff. You can move on to getting the basics of flour and sugar to make your own stuff. You can move on to maybe getting some Mountain House here and there. But in the very beginning, I would highly suggest just going out and getting some canned foods. They'll be the easiest way to go about it. And then you got to figure out what you're going to make with this stuff. So in my next video, I'm going to be talking about preparedness cooking and creating meal plans. Join me then, and thank you so much for watching. If you like my videos, please consider supporting me on Patreon, link down below. And if you like my videos, come visit me at Facebook and Instagram and on my website, all links down below. Remember, conquer tomorrow by preparing today. Bye-bye.